Hi, my name is Art Bergeron. I'm an attorney at Myrick O'Connell. Welcome to the first episode of a show that we're developing and working with here with Grafton Cable TV. We're calling it Bergeron Briefs, and we're trying to focus on a whole variety of issues, specifically dealing with elder law and elders. I decided that for the first several shows, I'd be focusing on what is probably the most common topic that folks talk to me about. They talk to me oftentimes, they're calling because they're concerned about what they say are a number of issues, but really it's Alzheimer's disease. It's a tremendous fear that they may be struck with Alzheimer's or some other disease, but primarily it's Alzheimer's that may create dementia. And so I wanted to start off by inviting a few guests to just be talking about that issue. I've invited my friend Tammy Pozaricki, who's going to be talking about what she does, my friend Maureen Sergi, and we're just going to be talking about, because they are directly involved as professionals in dealing with these issues a lot. I want to start with Maureen. Maureen, can you just tell me about, you work for who?
I work for Elder Services of Worcester area.
The Elder Services of Worcester area.
Right.
And can you tell me what that is?
Sure.
Is this a nonprofit? Is this a for-profit? What do you do?
We're a nonprofit agency. We have been designated by the state of Massachusetts to be an aging service access point. And the goal is to be...
And I often hear the term ASAP.
ASAP, exactly.
And that's what that means,
Sure.
An aging service access point.
Sure. Our mission is to provide programs and services to elders and caregivers and some younger people with disabilities, with the goal of allowing them to remain in the community for as long as possible, at the highest level of functioning possible and at the safest level as possible. We are providing services to over 4,000 consumers every month. We're basically a case management model where we have a team, a case manager and a nurse who will go into the home and determine eligibility for our services, do an assessment of how a person is functioning, identify areas that that person may need assistance with, and then putting together a care plan. We use state dollars to purchase services that actually go into the home or into the community to a place such as a supportive daycare program or an adult day health program.
So people who are dealing with Elder Services of Greater Worcester?
Of Worcester area.
Elder Services of Worcester area are not paying you except indirectly. They've paid their tax dollars, and their tax dollars are paying to provide a kind of a variety of services. Would that be fair to say?
Our services are available to people with very low income at no cost. Those on Mass Health and those whose income is at the very low end of the scale. People do pay a co-payment.
I see.
They may pay $7 a month for services, or they may pay $120 a month for services, depending on their income.
I see.
That's a bargain compared to the cost of buying services in the private pay market. But we also provide services to respite services to caregivers of elders, regardless of income.
And we're going to talk about that one,
Sure.
that a little bit. And by the way, what about you personally? So how long have you been at Elder Services, and who are you?
I'm the assistant director at Elder Services of Worcester area. I have been there for 33 years.
Almost an aged person.
Almost.
That's great.
I started as a case manager out in the field, out in the elders' homes. I moved into the protective services unit, really dealing with people who were getting themselves into trouble because of an inability to care for themselves any longer. I've been a supervisor and the director of services and the assistant director for about 20 years, along with Lou Swan, who is our executive director.
So I gather you like this.
It's a great organization, some very committed people who are there to really make a difference in elders' lives and caregivers' lives.
And Tammy, can you just tell me about yourself and about what you do?
Sure. I'm Tammy Pozaricki, and I own Pleasant Tree's Adult Day Program and Consulting Services in Marlborough. And
in far away Marlborough. So you're kind enough to come all the way to Grafton, right?
A little bit.
Because you know me and I forced you to. Okay.
But my model is in a home, and I take care of 10 to 14 folks every day who have memory issues that are dealing with Alzeimer's or other dementia, to give them a place to come where there's a failure-free social environment. And of course, socialization has been certainly one of the treatment options for Alzheimer's and dementia.
And how long has Pleasant Trees been around?
We are in our 5th year.
That's great.
So.
And for folks who are listening to this who are thinking to themselves, "Oh, I'm in Worcester. Marlborough is a long ways away." No.
Well, they think it's another country, actually.
Are there any so-called social day models that exist in Worcester or in the communities that immediately touch Worcester?
There's actually New England Dream Center. That's in Worcester, and actually Bay Path, Worcester Elder Services contracts with them. And my program in Marlborough off of 290. And as far as I know, that's pretty much
Those
it.
are the programs.
And then you get into the medical model, adult day health.
And we maybe if we have the chance, we're going to talk about that, although we may also be talking about that in a later show. So can we just be talking about, kind of setting the table and talking about the issue here? So Alzheimer's disease, and I know oftentimes people will tell me that they've got Alzheimer's or they've got dementia, and they think that's the same thing. So just so that I'm clear, my understanding is that dementia broadly is a set of symptoms.
Correct.
Right? A set of cognitive memory loss and some related things. Alzheimer's is one of the things that may cause dementia.
Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. It's the most prevalent.
The most prevalent
type.
So, for example, in where you are, what percentage of the population would you say has got issues that are Alzheimer's related, as opposed to having other kinds of issues that have caused dementia?
Well, Alzheimer's is the #1 dementia diagnosis.
Yeah.
But you have to consider that sometimes it can also be misdiagnosed, because there's several different types of dementia out there. But Alzheimer's is the one that everyone's looking at now, because it's affecting folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and all the way up. 1 out of 3 seniors will develop some type of dementia. But in my case, in the social day model, 90% of the dementia in my experience.
You would say is Alzheimer's related.
Right.
And Maureen, across that broader area, across your service area, would you say that most of the cases that you're dealing with when you're dealing with dementia are Alzheimer's related?
I would say yes. We certainly see some other diseases such as frontal lobe dementia and Lewy body disease, but it speaks to the importance of getting an accurate diagnosis and getting that diagnosis early on in the beginning phases, and not to wait too long.
And let's talk about that now. So often I'll get a call from someone, a client or a potential client, who is saying, "Oh, Ma's really forgetting things," right? Sometimes, very rarely, I'll get a call from someone saying, "Well, I think I'm forgetting things." That's very rare. So the question is, so what are the triggers? Are there particular symptoms that you could say to yourself, "Yeah, this isn't just I'm getting older," because we know I think among the 3 of us here, we all have those days where we feel like, "Oh, am I going down the slippery slope now?" Right? So what is the difference between that and what may be legitimately a cause for concern, in that it may be part of a set of disease issues?
Alzheimer's disease is really a disease that affects memory and thinking and reasoning. And certainly the Alzheimer's Association is a great resource to help people sort through that fear that, my gosh, I'm forgetting my keys. Is this the beginning of a disease?
Oh, and can you, parenthetically now, can you just talk about the Alzheimer's Association for a second?
The Alzheimer's Association of Massachusetts and New Hampshire is the go-to agency as far as expertise around diagnosis, education, supporting caregivers, fundraising, so that research can continue, because the goal is to really help find a cure and eradicate this disease, because we're facing what's often called an epidemic. As the baby boomers, as all of us move into the aging process, there's a fear that the incidence of Alzheimer's disease will blossom into something that's unmanageable at a time where there may be fewer people available to provide that care.
Take care. And so the Alzheimer's Association is really focusing on those issues.
Yes.
And I know that one of the things I'm able to do as part of doing the show is I'm able to do some banners at the end of the show giving information. So we'll make sure that for folks who are watching, that they get the phone number and the email address of the Alzheimer's Association. Because it's my understanding they even have a hotline.
24 hours.
24 hours for caregivers, because oftentimes at 2 o'clock in the morning a caregiver is struggling with behavioral issues, or somebody who's not sleeping or seeking to leave the home.
Right.
So there's support there available 24 hours a day.
And that's so huge.
Yeah.
So going back to the symptoms, how would you what should you do if your spouse, right, or your mother or your father or even one of your neighbors is acting how, when should you be concerned enough that you want to be asking somebody about really looking at this closely?
Well, I would say that I can give you an example. I mentioned if somebody gets concerned if they lose their keys. That happens to all of us. But if you can retrace your steps and figure out the process to go back and find those keys, you probably don't have anything to worry about. But it's the person who loses things or finds themselves lost and is just confounded and not able to figure that out. There's probably a cause for concern. It may be a change in behavior, a little bit of a change in personality. Sometimes depression shows itself as somebody's world gets smaller and smaller. A family needs to watch for these symptoms and get to the medical doctor as the first step.
I would think that and not to interrupt you, but I would think that a lot of the depression and that kind of the emotional side of this would be a direct reaction to that. Because I would assume if I'm the elder, I know something's different, and this must be just so frightening.
It's devastating
just
and frightening.
So frightening.
Yes.
And so you said is the first thing then? Well, you may want to call the Alzheimer's Association. Would your primary care physician be the right person to talk to?
I think that's the place to start.
Yeah.
Because it's possible that there might be something physically going on that's causing symptoms that can be fixed or improved upon. But if the doctor has concerns as well, I think it's important for the doctor to refer to a neurologist who can do some further testing and really get at the diagnosis. And I know, Tammy, I remember you were talking about a case of someone that you had where they thought it was an Alzheimer's issue, but it turned out it was NPH. They had a normal pressure hydrocephalus, which fluid on the brain, and had a shunt put in, and the person was fine. And the issue got resolved. But it can be medication side effects. It can be a vitamin deficiency. Non-treated depression can actually look like dementia. Can look like dementia. So the kind of the message of the story is that the last thing you want to do is nothing. That's right. Because I think one of the things that I find when I'm talking to my clients is that as opposed to cancer, as opposed to diabetes, that Alzheimer's isn't regarded as a disease, it's regarded as an embarrassment. It's something that you don't want to tell anybody about, and I find so often people who are suddenly they will stop making appointments. They'll stop visiting their friends. They withdraw. Or their spouse will say, "Oh no, we don't want to see anybody anymore," because they're just afraid. They're just afraid. Now, what about if you're afraid to go to your doctor? What if you just don't want to talk to them? I know I've had people who they were concerned that having that visit on their medical record was going to may affect them later on. Is there anybody else? I know I've heard of geriatric care managers. I've heard about. Are there any other players where people could go to initially to be talking about this, or is that an Alzheimer's Association question? Well, there certainly is a lot of fear associated with facing the fact that you might have the disease. Geriatric care managers are a wonderful resource in helping the elder and the family, the caregivers, do some planning and putting together services in the community. I would say that most often the primary care physician is the least threatening of all the options because they most often have a relationship. And I think that physicians are very sensitive to how they approach a patient and get them to the care that they need. Certainly somebody could go to a geriatric psychiatrist. I think that may be more frightening in many instances, although again a wonderful service and a wonderful resource. I see. But I think the physician is most often the place to start. And once you've started down that, because of course both of you have seen a lot of those kinds of cases, right? In general, obviously each person's situation is going to be specific, but in general, are there things that people can do if you've kind of got these very early symptoms, right? But you're just trying to slow things down, or you're trying to keep from continuing down that road. First of all, is there a cure? No. There's no cure at this point. So the real question is, can you slow it down, right?
What can you do in general? Are there things that you've found, because you're dealing with a lot of folks? And
Yes.
I guess, and I'm interested in the role of the kind of program that you have, and I'm interested in the kind of services that you're contracting for with various other places in terms of what people can do. So it's pretty open-ended. What can you do?
I find that to slow it down, well, first of all, to talk about going to the physician. There are medications out there that have been proven to slow the process down. But that's a pharmacological approach. The other is the trying to really fight that withdrawal and isolation, because research has shown that socialization with other folks and getting out there and being in contact with people, using your brain, using your body, keeping it active, does slow it down. And that's what I've found in my experience.
So both social activity and physical activity, you're saying,
Yes.
can both help.
The Alzheimer's Association has really been focusing on brain health. Just as we think about heart health and other diseases that affect people's systems, it's felt that if you eat well, you take care of yourself, the same old diet and exercise, that will help with brain health as well. The importance of the early diagnosis, which again is a focus of the Alzheimer's Association and all of us in the community, is that while it may be frightening, it will empower the patient to actually be involved with planning for legal issues, financial issues, how they want their care provided, what types of care, and even so far as end-of-life planning. It's probably the scariest of all topics, but an important conversation for parents to have with their grown children, so that any caregiver will know what that person's wishes are. So the Alzheimer's Association also has support groups and educational programs for the patients themselves. That's why it's so important to get that early diagnosis.
That's an interesting point, to be trying to address those issues as early as possible in the process, and, as you were suggesting, to be trying to get your family involved in all of that, right? Although, once again, that's a real, if in families that haven't been working well, that can be a tremendous source of dysfunction.
Sure.
That's the one thing, the empowerment and education is just so important, because then they feel like they can have and retain some sense of control.
Right, right. So, so if you happen to be there and you're in these kinds of early stages, and you're calling Elder Services, what would Elder Services? Obviously, each person is different. But can you talk to us about the kinds of programmatic things or services that Elder Services would have available?
Sure. I mentioned eligibility for our services, and our biggest program is the state home care program, where we get that funding to do the assessment, put together the care plan, and pay for services to come into the home. However,
so the state pays you to do that stuff, to figure out how that package is going to work.
And we have contracts in place for providers such as supportive day programs and adult day healths and homemaker agencies that actually go into the home, and we reimburse them using those state dollars.
And when you were trying to figure that out, what would be the process for doing that? If I called, either because my mom or my dad were concerned, or if I was concerned for myself, what would your person be doing?
Our person would go into the home and
they'd actually come out and visit.
Do a home visit and do an assessment there with the elder and with any family members that elder chooses to have present and involved in the assessment. So we will look at eligibility for our services. But if somebody's not eligible, we will work with the elder and the family to try and come up with other options. We certainly can't do this alone, and there are many other services and providers, such as the PACE program out in the community, which is the program of all-inclusive care. So we'll either work to identify unmet needs and to put services in place to meet those needs, or to help people figure out the options to get those services. But I will say we've got a number of programs, too many to talk about today. We have a large protective services unit which deals with elder abuse and neglect. We've got the nutrition program, the Meals on Wheels, but there are really 3 services that I would say would be helpful to an elder or a caregiver regardless of income or eligibility. And the first is our information and referral department, where we've got resources for the whole of Worcester County that we can over the telephone talk to somebody who they often don't know what it is they need or where they should begin,
right,
and sort through that and give them information.
Yep.
We also have an options counselor program where we've got specially trained workers who will sit with an elder, sit with a family, sit with one person or 10 people, because it's a difficult road for a single caregiver. It's a difficult road when there are many siblings trying to agree on the best course of action.
Right.
So the options counselor will look at the whole range of, listen to the situation, look at the whole range of options.
And would that options counselor be typically functioning from your office, or would that person also occasionally be
whatever works.
Whatever works.
It could be in the home, in our office, or in another neutral setting if we need to bring a lot of people together.
And once again, not to be repetitive about this, but that piece of the program, you're saying, is a piece of the program that you're basically doing free as far as the elder is concerned.
Yes.
That's one of the things that the Commonwealth of Mass and the United States is paying for.
Right.
Our tax dollars at work. So elders shouldn't, so often, it's like a lot of these folks are from that last, the Depression and World War II generation, and they don't want charity, and they don't want to be relying on anybody. So the notion that this is just something that they've paid for, that they have paid for, and that they're entitled to, and to have someone not be forcing themselves into the home, but just going in to kind of talk about those options. That's just like really important.
You know, I think there's a fear that people will lose their independence, and we're certainly not, none of the services in the community are there to take somebody's independence away, but we're there to support their independence for as long as possible. And speaking of the government, the federal government actually recognizes that caregivers are providing a tremendous amount of care in this country and saving the government a lot of money. So they have developed the Family Caregiver Support Program. Locally, that's a regional program with Elder Services of Worcester area, Montechusett Home Care to the North County, and Tri-Valley Elder Services to the South County, and the Area Agency on Aging.
By the way, I just want to step back from there. There was a term that we used earlier, which was called the ASAPs, which were Aging
Service Access Points.
Aging Service Access Points. So it's my understanding that there is one of those
in every community in the state of Massachusetts.
So Grafton is part of your area.
Yes.
And but for people who are talking to their relatives or friends who might be living someplace else, there is somebody.
There is.
Right? And they just need to kind of go find them, right?
Find them, call any one of us, and we'll direct you to the appropriate place.
Okay, so I didn't mean to be interrupting.
Okay,
so talk about that
Family
caregiver
support program. We have a caregiver specialist in our office whose goal is to do outreach and find caregivers, because they're sometimes hard to reach. Caregivers find themselves sometimes very quickly overwhelmed with providing care and don't have time to find out what help is out there, or have no idea what help is out there. To provide education to those caregivers, to help them do a good job, to help them deal with behavior issues, to help them deal with planning issues, to help figure out when they need to take care of themselves so that they can continue to provide care. So we do these in collaboration with many other providers and organizations across the service area. We do have a caregiver's guide, which is a great resource, and the Alzheimer's Association has one as well.
Do you have? I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Sorry. Do you have support groups? Are there support groups also, kind of peer-to-peer?
We certainly direct people to support groups. We're not providing any at Elder Services of Worcester area, but we've got the lists of all of the local support groups, which are a wonderful option for people to really help them recharge their batteries and continue to provide care.
And to know they're not alone.
Absolutely.
And to not get guilted out.
Sure.
I mean, I talk to so many folks, and I'll tell them, I say, you know, you're not doing your husband any favor by dropping dead, right? If it's going to kill you to take care of them, then you've got to figure out another way to do this. But you know, there are so many spouses out there who will say, you know, I'll never let my wife down. I'll never let my husband down, and they'll kill themselves to do that. Or, you know, or they'll get frustrated because they're doing these things, and the spouse who is going through a whole lot of other stuff for themselves is getting really angry and often taking it out on that spouse. So just the notion of being someplace where you can get the sense you're not alone, and that those are symptoms that are predictable symptoms is just like so important.
Oftentimes, I run a support group for caregivers with Alzheimer's, and oftentimes I see the most invaluable feeling in the world is guilt. And the working with these folks who are guilty said they promised their mom and dad, they promised their spouse.
Because every day their mom would say, don't ever send me to a nursing home.
That's right.
Never, right?
And it's working with them to say, but that's the right thing right now for you and the person. You know, it's a tough road for these folks.
I think that's an important point that we often, as we talk about all of our efforts to keep people in the community, there are times when an institutional setting, a nursing facility, is the right thing to do. There are many wonderful Alzheimer's units in the area where there are specially trained people, and it can really enhance an elder's quality of life to go from the recliner in their home to a facility where there's structure and there are activities, and that allows the family to really be the daughter, be the son, be the spouse, and not have to worry about 24-hour care. So it's always an important thing to remind people, because it's often a heart-wrenching decision when there's been that promise.
It's funny that you put it that way, because I remember going to actually a hospice facility. There's a residential hospice facility here in Worcester, whose name escapes me. I know there are two. I'm not good at that part. My mind, you know, I'm slipping. But I remember going to the hospice facility, and they were talking to us about this one patient who had come in, who'd been in that particular facility. The person who is in kind of end stage issues has one room, and they'll provide another room for the caregiver, right? And she was talking about the fact that this daughter was so happy that her mother was there, because she said, right now I get to be the daughter again. I don't have to be doing all this other stuff. I don't have to be administering the drugs and doing the this and doing the that. But I think so there are situations where that's important. That said, I think for all of us, and that's what it's so gratifying to hear that these programs are available for every client I talk to. When you say, well, what is your goal for the rest of your life, is they want to stay at home and be buried in the backyard. They never, ever want to leave home. And for a person who is getting frail or who has this kind of early stage dementia, I don't think anything is more intimidating than the notion for them, who they know that their memory isn't as good as it was, and now to be placed in a place where they don't know where the bathroom is, and they don't know where the salt and pepper shakers are. And there may be some language issues, because you've got a lot of staff there that oftentimes is English as a second language, that they're very concerned about those kinds of issues. But as you say, at some point it may be that that's a necessary choice.
But our goal is to put that off for as long as possible, and we haven't talked a lot about the services that are in place to help do that. I would say when in the earlier stages, somebody might be eligible for some of our programs that might provide just a little bit of assistance, maybe with Meals on Wheels, maybe with somebody coming in and doing the laundry and the grocery shopping, maybe a supportive day program. That's important for the elder, and it's important for the caregiver to give them some respite. As the disease progresses and they're in the later stage and require more care, we have some enhanced programs, and I think some of your programs have talked about the Frail Elder Waiver and the ability to provide more services to somebody to really support that caregiver. We need to have the caregiver involved, because we don't replace nursing homes in the home, but we certainly can provide daily service. We can provide more relief to the caregiver. It might be an adult day health program that has more of a medical model than the supportive day program.
And can you just talk about what adult day health programs are just for a second?
Adult day health programs are a similar model to the supportive day program, where it's a structured environment. Somebody goes to a site during the day, usually for about 6 hours. In an adult day health program, they get their meals, their medication can be managed there, any other daily medical needs, if somebody's struggling with incontinence, that can be handled in that situation. It allows the person to go during the day, come back to their loved ones at night. It's a wonderful service. They both are tremendous services for people, and a real, it's sometimes difficult to get caregivers to take that step and say, they'll know my mom was never very social, I don't think she'll like it. But when you see the impact that these activities, these meaningful activities have on somebody. It really, I encourage everybody to try it. And I think
there's
once
such
they do,
a high percentage of folks who think that their loved one isn't going to participate, and all of a sudden, wow.
And all of a sudden
they're
they
engaged.
go and they engaged.
Right.
I remember having a client who had gone to your place.
Yeah.
Right? And as a result, the client who is in a nursing home now
Yes.
and has been in a nursing home, wow, for probably 3 years now. However, that experience, that shift was probably delayed by at least a year, maybe 2 years,
Right.
from being engaged in a program that I think kept that person really alive, very socially alive, and also gave the spouse a break,
Right.
so that she could really maintain him at home during the rest of the rest of the time. Now, if you are if you are medically not yet able to, say, qualify for nursing home care, can you still receive any assistance through, for example, a medical model, one of these day programs that you were just talking about?
well, I think if somebody's not eligible for nursing home care, they're probably more appropriate for the supportive day program.
I
And
see.
certainly we're providing services to many people way before they're eligible to be in a nursing home,
Right.
because that keeps them where they want to be, and it's certainly cheaper for the state to spend that money in the community as opposed to somebody going on to Mass Health in a nursing facility. So we're providing services to people who are eligible medically to be in a nursing home, but we try and reach them before that to prolong that period of time where they're able to stay in their own homes.
And so kind of the moral of the story is, A, there are a whole variety of programs that are specifically designed for people to help them stay at home and stay with their loved ones. B, if they're trying to figure all that out, they don't have to. They can call you.
They can call. That's the important message. You know, we've talked a lot about
and you're not
eligibility.
paying, and they're not charging.
Not paying for that. Call
That's
us and let us help you figure it out. That's our message.
Because that's your tax dollars at work. You paid for
Absolutely.
these things and you deserve them.
Yes.
Well, on the next show, we're going to be talking about the programs that are available for folks who are more frail and who have more advanced, are in a more advanced stage of dementia. But we really appreciate both of you coming today
It's been a
to be
pleasure.
talking about this whole variety of issues. They're very important. And once again, at least at the end of the show, you're going to be getting a banner that's going to show you the phone numbers and the email addresses, both of Elder Services of the Worcester area and of the Alzheimer's Association. You owe it to yourself, if you think that this is an issue for you, to be contacting those folks. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.